What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of your favorite podcast on this planet, and that is the MLO Project. Joining me, as always, is my co-host, Mr. McAllister, who's throwing up gang signs on YouTube. So you guys can check that out there. Michael, what's up, buddy?
What's up, dude? What's up? I was trying to think of like cool way that we can kick stuff off. I'm just restless. I'm always restless, you know? So I'm like, I don't know why gang signs came to mind or like the MLO.
MLO,
like,
yeah.
You know, you said let's roll going into this. And what I thought of is that song. Who sings that song? Chase something. It's a country song where it's like, where at the beginning it's like, ready, set, let's roll. And I'm like, dude, we should take a clip of that at the beginning and get sued for copyright infringement probably, because I imagine that is trademarked. But I just thought it would be a cool intro. I don't know, dude. I'm just restless. How are you doing?
I'm good, man. And yeah, let's by all means let's figure out how to get sued on this bad boy. It'd be awesome. So add another what is it? Another check mark to the to our growth list, which is being sued, or cease and desist. We haven't got any of those. I figured we would get something from Veterans United, but I think we've been able to fly under the radar on that one. But my friends, on a serious note, a lot of the things, content that I've been posting about and talking about that I'm doing, in my coaching group as well. But something that Michael and I have talked about when we're looking at the environment of the industry. So the topic I came up for today is, and I posted this on LinkedIn, I think last week, or depending on when this podcast comes out, maybe a couple of weeks ago, is whether you buy into it or not, like we are, is my belief, right? That we are transitioning into a new economy. And I believe that we've already had one transition, which was post-COVID to 2025. And then with AI and all these, consumerism, and then you guys all know what's going on with like the war and everything else, and oil prices and rates and everything, affordability, because none of that's gone away. We are transitioning into a new economy, new market. And so the question I posed, and this is what we're going to talk about today, is that I want you all to look at your model and look at your business. And there's two questions. This one is, if post-COVID conditions happened again, right? So we're talking 2022 Q2, somewhere around there. Let's call it mid-year. If that happened again today, which I think some could argue some are, would your business survive, thrive, or fail? Right? Which one of those three would your model do? Now, it is my personal belief that this new economy, because of the waterfall effect that AI is going to have on a lot of different jobs, also a lot of new opportunities too. Right. So it's not about doomsday. It's just about a reshuffling of our client base, one form or another. Meaning, just real quick, so you guys kind of understand what I'm talking about, is that, let's say that, because most white collar jobs is what's been shown as being effective, and we're talking like $75,000 to $175,000 and in income, right? Those types of jobs, or 100 to 175, depends on the state, right? On what that is. It's just like middle class. Middle class isn't the same across the country. It's state by state specific, right? And so knowing that, understanding that AI is going to eliminate jobs, but also affect a lot of jobs and what people make. It's also going to push those people into figuring out like what they're going to do, which to me is always going to be entrepreneurial, and it's always going to bleed into the gig, the gig economy. And with that means you're going to have more non-QM type lending as opposed to qualified mortgage, because people that may have been able to do, FHA or conventional now are going to be self-employed, or bank statement, those types of programs. And so I believe that this new economy will disrupt by basically post-COVID by a factor of 5 or 10, right? Maybe even more. And so secondary question is, if post-COVID was 10x, would your business survive, thrive, or fail? And one thing I could tell you is, when we had all of these, we had I don't know, what was it, a week or 2 weeks where rates were like, everyone was like riding high, like, oh, rates are going down, and everyone's like, oh, now we're going to wait from the, consumers are waiting to go lower and whatnot. And then, Iran happened, and then oil and everything else shot back up. Right. And again, the math, rates tend to be more of a doomsday type indicator, meaning like when things are bad, rates tend to be better. Right. And this just was not the case. And so again, this goes back to the math is not mathing. And there's reasons for that. But the point is that everyone like assumes rates were going to continue to go down. So what happened is that there was a lot of companies that were building for that, right? Which to me is building for hope and building for conditions that don't yet exist, as opposed to building for what you have now to be successful. And then what do we see in Facebook groups? Like, hey, our whole team just got laid off. Our whole, our call center LOs just got laid, like literally, and they just got hired like 4 months ago, 3 or 4 months ago. And so now, because we are human capital focused as an industry and not, trying to, use AI and automation in a more intelligent way, like this is where we're at. And so so I wanted to discuss that about models, and I want you guys that are listening to think about that. Like, is your models, is your business model built to be sustainable regardless of the market? Because that's obviously what we focus on with what we talk about. So, Michael, I want to get your thoughts on that whole dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, I think to go back talking about what we mean by post COVID, because it's hard to use things that are going on in the world to indicate market shifts and the potential for future market shifts, because conditions are just so freaking different. But at the end of the day, what we're talking about is the disruption itself. We're not talking about the specific condition. We're talking about the disruption that creates the conditions, right? And so with post COVID, what was it? It was post stimulus inflation that was causing interest rates to rise rapidly after a very long, unprecedented period of near zero interest rates, right? So that's the condition that created kind of that shift over a couple years post COVID. And so what is it now? It's to your point, it's the Iran war. It's the expectation and the hope from the entire economy, not just the mortgage industry, but the entire economy, that we were headed for a period of time with lower interest rates, with lower inflation, that was just completely rocked by the war in Iran, where now we are back into a spot of like very, very real inflation risk. And so what does that mean for interest rates? Like, we might see interest rates go up 1% to 1.5% before we see them go down 1% to 1.5%. And if it's not that, then it's the labor market being disrupted insanely by AI right now. And it's probably a combination of the two, because what do companies do when money gets tight? They figure out ways to optimize, and never before have they had the tools that they have today to optimize. And so we're likely going to see a combination of those two, where we see inflation go up, and what does that do? It causes companies to optimize more and more, which means less jobs, less real jobs. And the thing about the tech piece, and the fact that this is going to affect white collar workers, is that this is going to be like, it's interesting, because most of us can't remember when there were like very localized depressions caused by like mines closing down and railroad projects being abandoned and stuff like that. And it's like, I feel like that's kind of what we're headed with white collar work, right? It's like your coastal tech area, tech type areas that are going to be depressed by this shift. But at the same time, those are very high. It's very highly desirable real estate, and so other people that have money are going to be there to move. It's weird times coming. And to your point, like, to try and predict what's going to come out of this is to hope, really. Like to try and like point to some timeline on the horizon and say, this is what I think is going to happen by like via all of this, is a hopeful strategy and not really a strategy at all. It's gambling, essentially. And so I think now more than ever, the only thing that we can do is get as lean, as possible, is stick to sound fundamentals, Mick, but at the same time, where in the past maybe you could duck and ignore the tech noise and invest in fundamentals in strictly that sense and strictly the fundamental sense. You can't do that this time because AI is going to be such a big part of this disruption that you're kind of going to be forced, in my opinion, to like marry the two, fundamentals and AI and tech disruption, more than we've ever seen it before. And so again, I think, the recipe likely, I'm not old enough to have gone through these types of shifts enough times to be able to be like, hey, the recipe is the same every single time. But, I've been around long enough to see a couple of these and a couple patterns. And to be honest with you, there's probably people listening to this saying, you know what, the recipe really is the same anytime you head into a period of uncertainty like this. It's get lean and sell your way through it, basically. Get lean and sell. And that's, to me, is like the only, like, if even with Empower, right? Like, that's, I was going to say if I'm an LO, but it's like, instead we have a business that's 100% dependent on the success of LOs. And so it's basically the same thing. What are we doing? Like, get lean, sell, get lean, sell. Like, that's all really I can say, as far as how we're approaching this.
And, I don't compliment Michael that much on this podcast, and I'm not going to start today. But what Michael said was actually, I think, probably the most important element, even though we're still in mid podcast. But I think what he said is something that is going to be the soundbite for this podcast, and that is the predictability aspect of what we do in the industry. Like, we're all about trying to forecast what are rates going to do, right? Like, whether we're talking to whether we're talking to other lenders, right, whether we're talking to other loan officers or whatnot, is that it's always about, rates this, what is the market going to do? You see it in the Facebook groups. Hey, where do you see affordability? Like, and guys, look, we've been wrong this entire time, right? For what affordability was going to do, what rates were going to do, what this and that and whatever. And so, to, as Michael was explaining it, all I'm thinking in my head is that, like, that's how the industry is. It's like, we're all about predicting and forecasting. Now, some will argue, well, like, hey, business forecasting is a thing. True. Right. But ultimately, is what happens is that everyone is utilizing the same construct that they always did. Right. Like, people that are post financial meltdown. So we'll call it, I don't know, 2009 to 2012, right? Like a 3-year swing. One could argue it went longer than that, right? But let's just keep it very simple. When you're looking at that construct, right? People are like, well, I did X, Y, and Z, right? And without it, we already talked about, or Michael already mentioned, like, kind of the backstop of what was happening in during the COVID times, right? So everyone's like, we had a backstop for post global financial meltdown, propped it up by what the government was doing, right? And so, like, we had nowhere to go but up, right? So those certain things of strategies that they deployed at that time was basically with the safety net of the backstop, right? Same goes for COVID. Same thing is, like, world was shutting down, right? Government stepped in, right? And so we had a backstop. And so everyone's like, all of a sudden, everyone's a top producer. Everyone's awesome, right? And that's when that rising tide is lifting the mediocre along with, the good people, right? And then only when that wave dissipates do we see who is, as Warren Buffett says, who was swimming naked, right? Which we see a lot. And so when now, as Michael's talking about that strategy, is that the same players that have only known those things are not looking at, like, the tried and true principles. And this is the point that Michael, kind of finished with, but they're looking at the construct of what they built the last time. And that just does not exist anymore, right? That's why you saw companies that were around for a long time, they're no longer around anymore, because they tried to play in that same construct. And some of them were saved or continue to be saved by MSRs. Some of them were continued to be saved by just their positioning in the market of what they built or being somewhat new. So they didn't have a lot of bloat, right, so to speak. But, to Michael's point there at the end is that, and this is what I've built for, why I am so gung ho on what I've built with different, is because it's not about building damn top producers, right? It's about building effective producers that build sustainable business no matter what the market conditions go, right? And so to Michael's point of like outselling, right? That's what we're talking about. Is you simply have to outsell the shift. So there's elements of that, and these are the things. And guys, I'd because I'm doing this every single day on Growth Notes, and so it's going to be a long-term series, so you can listen to those. But like that's what we're talking about, is that you could only outsell the shift, and you have to build a sustainable business based off of what the market is. Because here's the thing: is that regardless of whatever the market does, right? These principles and fundamentals stay the same, right? If you look back at every single one, is that like, are you going to focus on providing value to consumers, right? Yes. Are are you going to focus on the value of retaining their services? Yes. Right. Are you going to be more communicate? Now again, this is what I'm saying you need to do. Whether you're going to do it or not is a different question, but like these are the things that you need to do, meaning like you're going to have a lot of pressure, and how are you going to respond to that pressure? Are you going to go and freaking complain in a Facebook group like a lot of people are doing? Like seeing some of these posts are just absolutely ridiculous right now, and it's a bad mindset, and unfortunately it infects the worst parts of all of us when they see it and they happen to feel a little down that day because they just lost a deal or something like that, and they latch on to that crap. Like it really is poison now. And so that is why we are so gung-ho on just bringing the right minds and people together to talk about the things that matter. Because at the end of the day, like everyone's complaining about, like it's like complaining about whether the sun rises and sets. It's going to happen. Sun is going to rise every morning. Sun is going to, hopefully, right? And sun is going to set hopefully every night, right? Like is there going to be oxygen? Yes. Right. Like, so to sit there and complain about like, oh man, this freaking sunrise today and it's going to set again at that, like it's the same thing complaining about everything else, right? Like it's going to happen, and you can't control the market, right? You can't control how consumer sentiment's going to be. You can't control freaking rates, but yet what do we all talk and complain about? The shit that we can't control. And so right now, under this pressure, it's going to show like who's geared up for this new economy and who's not. And unfortunately, as I'm looking at some of these posts, especially on LinkedIn, uh, you know, I think it just needs to happen, right? I think there just needs to be another calling of people that just don't get it. And right. And whoever's left is left. And it's not because I'm looking for people to lose jobs or whatever. And I know everyone like wants to focus on that stuff, but at the end of the day, like businesses fail all the time. Right. And but to their own deal. So my thing to all of you is like, make sure you're aligning people that are rooted and grounded in principles, right? The fundamentals of sales, right? And evolving those people that are rooted in discipline, people that are rooted in a winning mindset, people that are rooting in making smart decisions, right? And people that are rooted in being bold, right? And seeing opportunity. Without that, you're just kind of more of the same and being in a group of Eeyores that are like, well, this sucks and that sucks. And then none of it matters, right? Tell me one time that complaining has actually made a difference in the world. It just does not do it. Right. In fact, it makes it worse. And so all of you, going back to the questions I ask, is really like, are you geared for this new world? If it is, because the beauty of what we're talking about is like, you do all the shit that we're talking about, and again, I just rattled off a list of them. Doesn't matter what the market does. You're going to be okay, right? As long as you do it with expertise, you do it with effectiveness, you do it consistently, and you show up, right? You do those things and you're going to be okay, because that's going to put you in elite status in the upper echelon. It may not sound like it, but you know that everyone else is going to probably, walk the other way.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one thing to kind of remember as we go through, this, I said earlier, stay lean and sell, and your point is, sell, like outsell the shift. And I think that it's important because of AI and because of where I've seen a lot of LOs place their energy to to make sure that you're balancing those two priorities. Like in the past, you've been able to outsell market conditions on razor thin margins by spending. I was just talking to one of our clients who went to a PennyMac conference and was in a round table with other LOs, and there were a lot of like brokers in there that bought rate table leads. I wouldn't say a lot. There were a few, because he's a consumer direct guy, or like does a lot of consumer direct stuff. He's sitting in a round table with a couple rate table guys that operate on 12-bit margins. And they do make it up in volume. They have a lead spend of $300K a month. And now obviously there's levels to this shit, right? When I was an LO, I didn't have sound fundamentals, but I invested into ads for my business, and I was willing to spend 10 to 15 grand to make 30 or 40, and like that, those economics are great. And I've, for years I've heard LO say, if I could spend $1 and make $2, like I'm good. The thing is like, that's a very precarious position to be in with your business. And so when I'm saying stay lean and sell, like now more than ever, you have to be careful about spending money to make money as being your strategy. On the flip side of that, you can't cut your way to success. You can't cut your expenses far enough to make it through a market shift unless you're already making really good money. And so if you're not making the kind of money that's going to get you through a shift, focusing too much on cutting is going to compromise your sales efforts. And so now more than ever, I feel like the balance between those two ideas really has to be heated, and it's going to be heated, Heeded. Is that a word? Heated.
Heated?
I don't know. Yeah.
Oh, you mean like heed the advice?
Heed the advice.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, gotcha. Yeah. Sure. Why not?
I don't know. We're making up words.
It's our podcast. We do what we want.
Now more than ever, you've really got to pay attention to that balance, because like I said, I've been in conditions and I've been in situations where you can spend your way into the sales numbers that you need to get, or your expenses are high enough and your revenue is high enough that you could cut your way down to the numbers that you needed to get to. But most people aren't in that position because of the market that we've been in the last few years. Most people are not going to be able to cut their way through this. And so at the end of the day, like, you're going to have to sell, but you might not have the same cards in your hand that you've had in the past, and the same ability to find paid channels that can allow you to pay to play, so to speak, and sell your way through this that way. So I just wanted to throw that out there, because like I said, I think what I've seen more lately is the opposite, is people focusing on like optimizing their operations with tech. When you're a 1, 2, or 3 person shop, like, there's not a whole lot that you're gonna, I mean, it's cool. It's cool to see AI tools save you an extra a couple hours a month or whatever. But if it takes you out of sales for a week to do that, it's not that cool, and it's not going to be that cool for your business long term. So that's just something that popped into my head as you were talking about this. I definitely think making sure that you understand the balance between those two. When I say, get lean and sell. You can't do one without the other. And if you are going to focus on one over the other, focus on sell. Just make sure that you're not spending, that you're not spending too much to do that.
Yeah, that's another good point. And, I think that's just a good way to kind of wrap this episode, because that was something I was going to bring up, but you got it. And that is, you can't cut your way to profitability. You could stem the tide a bit, right, when you cut. But that's, guys, if you look at what we've done the last few years with mortgage companies, right? That's what everyone tried to do. They tried to cut their way as best they could, and there's only so much that you can do. And so, one of the things that, Michael, 2 things that Michael said there at the end, and we'll wrap with this, is one is If you don't have a scalable or an optimized back office, like now's the time to do that, right? Now's the time to do that. But also on the flip side of that, like Michael was saying, is like, where's that time being spent and what is it taking you away from? Is understand that, and this is what I tell everyone, right? Is like spending hours to make something more efficient, which does not equate to you being able to have more time because you don't get the time's done. So you don't get that time back. So like going in the future is those efficiencies. Do you also in lockstep with creating that time or future time? Do you have a plan and strategy to spend that time to bring, to actually affect your bottom line, right? And most people, they're like, oh, I built all this shit and all this stuff, and we talked about that on the episode about like, having a crazy ass CRM and automations and shit like that. Is that like, you like, that's great, but tell me what you're doing with that time. Tell me how that really helped your business, other than like, oh, it did something that I didn't like to do, so now it's doing that for me. Well, that's great, but like you just lost whatever, how many hours it was to put that in play, and you had no plan to capitalize on that time savings. And so that's what you need to think about as well, because ultimately time is a great equalizer. The winners of this new economy are going to be ones that are effective, and I call it time discipline, are going to be effective at time discipline, right? Because everyone else is going to be looking for hacks, shortcuts. Woe is me, can't do this, can't do that. And honestly, I just don't think the industry at large is prepared for what comes next. And we're going to see, right? And the beauty, again, not to kind of beat a dead horse, but the beauty is that what we talk about doesn't matter. If I'm 1,000% wrong, if Michael's 1,000% wrong, what you build in this time won't make a bit of difference as far as like there's no downside to doing that, right? There's zero downside to building what we're talking about, because it's going to work. If we're right, you're going to be great. If we're 100% wrong, guess what? You're also going to be great, because the field, you're putting yourself at an upper echelon part of the field. So with that, any final thoughts or?
Nope. That's it, man.
All right, my friends. Well, this was another fantastic episode of the MLO Project. As always, we are brought to you by Empower LO, where we have created a growth engine that does exactly what we talked about today. It gives you everything and anything you need to build a sustainable business. This isn't a CRM, because you could get that anywhere. CRMs is just another Me Too thing that you don't even need. You don't need anything. You just go to pipedrive.com or I think that's the domain or whatever, and get a CRM today, right? But what we're talking about is having every element of your business, strategy, planning, creation, content, all of it, and a community, right? That's all rowing in the same direction to help you be, because right now you got to be around the right people. You got to be around the right people, and that's what we've created with what we're doing here. So link is in the show notes. Check us out. On behalf of Mr. McAllister, I am Frazier, and we will see you on the next episode. Take care.